Welcome back everyone, this is History with Hilbert, and today I'm going to be making a few points about the Wars of the Roses. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Wars of the Roses were a series of dynastic conflicts, and yes, the plural is going to be important for this video, in England and Wales in the 15th century, the second half of the 15th century, although initially this wasn't the case for later on, it was for the control of the English throne and who ruled the country, whether that person was from the House of York or from the House of Lancaster. And these are often represented by these roses. So you have the red rose of Lancaster, the white rose of York, white rose, and then the combined Tudor rose, which was Henry VII's invention when the two houses came together with his marriage of Edward IV's daughter, Elizabeth of York. But in this video, I'm going to assess whether this name is fitting, because I've heard a few people in the past, and this is probably because I've been looking into the game War of the Roses, call this war the War of the Roses. But is this right? And I think that there's a very good reason that Wars of the Roses is plural, because I think there were more than one war here. And I also want to have a look at how much of a war this really was, and was it a war in the conventional sense, because in our idea of the Wars of the Roses is this very long-lasting, bloody conflict. And if you do look at the dates, you see that it does last for pretty much exactly 30 years if you go from the first battle right the way to Bosworth. But was this the case? Let's find out. So I've put the all the major battles of the Wars of the Roses up, and if the battle is in white, then it was won by the Yorkists, and if it's in red, it was won by the Lancastrians. And if we look at the dates here, we see that this goes right the way from the first one, 1455, first Battle of St Albans, right the way down to the Battle of Bosworth. But I want to have a look at some of these dates, because if we group them, we can see that there are clear stages of fighting. So you have initially the first Battle of St Albans. And a bit of background about this: Richard Plantagenet, he was the Duke of York. It's a different Richard to Richard III, that's his father actually. He disagreed with the councillors who were helping the king at that time, Henry VI, and he then marches down towards London with an army from York, which is in the north of England, to try and sort out these councillors. And then they fight a battle there, the Yorkists win, and they actually capture the English king. But to show that they weren't hostile, they weren't treasonous against the king, they captured the English king, who was on the Lancastrian side, and then they all knelt down in front of him, begged his forgiveness, and said, "We just want to get rid of the ill-advised councillors who are on your council." So that's a bit of background about the first one. But then it's 4 years until we see the next battle, which is at Blore Heath, because they try and sort out their differences in this time, but it doesn't work. And then we get this huge, the largest part of the fighting is in this early stage. So we have from Blore Heath, and then we have the killing of the Duke of York at the Battle of Wakefield. We have the ascendancy of Edward IV at Mortimer's Cross. Then we have the second Battle of St Albans, which I believe was when Margaret of Anjou defeated Warwick, who is the kingmaker. And then leading up to the Battle of Towton, which is, I believe, the bloodiest battle in English history. I think something like 1% of the population died in one day at the Battle of Towton, so it's like the English Somme. It was ridiculous. I'm going to make a few videos about that because I find it really interesting. But if we look at the dates in blue, this is all one area of fighting. And then we don't get another area of fighting until 64. And the reason for this is that after the Battle of Towton, Edward IV basically becomes the undeniable king of England. I think it's at the Battle of Towton that it might have been Tewkesbury. I literally always mix those two up. But some of the heirs, the Lancastrian heirs, are killed in all of these battles, which is why, in the end, in 1485, they have to get Henry Tudor, who has quite a weak claim to the throne, because the Yorkists have killed every other Lancastrian claimant. But we see that there are 3 years between this. And actually, I believe both the Battle of Hedgeley Moor and Hexham were both fought in the north between the Percys, who I think were Yorkists, and between two noble families in the north, the Nevilles and I think the Percys as well. So that's That's more sort of right in the far north of the country, right in Northumberland where I live. So that's again different. And then it's 5 years until we get the next piece of fighting. And Edgecote Moor is actually not against any Lancastrians, it's against Yorkist rebels. And in this period from 69 to 71, I think Edward Neville defects from King Edward's cause, or Richard Neville rather, sorry, who is the Earl of Warwick. He defects from the Yorkist cause because of a disagreement, because Edward IV married Elizabeth Woodville, who he didn't want him to marry. He wanted him to marry, I think it was a Burgundian princess, to strengthen the alliance with Burgundy, because the Yorkists had ties with Burgundy and whatnot, but that's besides the point. But it's only now that we see more fighting happening. So 5 years have gone past since 1464, and then 3 years have gone past since 1461 in that time. So there are clear breaks in the fighting. And actually, both of those in 1464 you can see as housekeeping. It's sorting out the north. You know, every English king does that at one point. They go north and they're like, right, sort it out, get the Hotspurs need to be put back in line. So we really see that there is a break in the fighting, and this isn't continuous fighting either when you look at these dates. And then obviously you get the Battle of Tewkesbury, in which I think Edmund, the Lancastrian heir, is killed, and they also, I think, capture Henry VI again because he is reinstated as king for a very small amount of time. But then Edward, I think he flees to the Netherlands, then he comes back to England. He marches through the country, loads of men come to his banner because Edward was a popular king, and he kills the kingmaker who betrayed him at Barnet, and then he marches on to Tewkesbury and defeats the Lancastrian army as well. And then obviously you have 1485, Battle of Bosworth. I've made a video about that, well, sort of covering that. I'll make a specific video on Bosworth as well because it's very interesting, but sort of on the effects of Bosworth and a bit of the story before Bosworth as well. So, how much fighting actually happened? Because, well, these are the major battles, and you might be saying, yeah, but these are the major battles, but what were the peasants doing? Were they, torching the others' farmhouses and stuff? Well, the Wars of the Roses is interesting because it's very much a noble thing. Well, and I mean that as in that it's something the nobility kept themselves busy with. The peasants, from what I know, weren't really too bothered. As long as they could go out and fight, and they could get in their harvest, if they could get paid, they didn't really care if they were dying under a Yorkist banner or a Lancastrian banner. This was much more important for the nobility, because if you think 30 years of war with these battles, and then nobles would be dying, obviously, but they would have children, and then those children were like, right, we're going to avenge them, avenge their death. We're going to go into battle again and kill, either the person who killed them or a family member. And this actually does happen quite a lot throughout the Wars of the Roses. But how much time was actually spent on campaign? And if you look at these dates, which I've color coordinated, then you can see that the campaigns were quite far-flung. They were quite stretched out over this period of 30 years. And actually there were only 13 weeks spent on campaign, and out of these battles only about 8 of them were major battles. Now the Battle of Towton absolutely overshadows all of them. I think probably more men died in the Battle of Towton than all the other battles of the Wars of the Roses put together. It was something ridiculous. As I said, about 1% of the English population died in one day at the Battle of Towton, so that's an exception. But apart from all of those, the battles are relatively small-sided. Not more than a few thousand men would have fought in most of these battles, and out of these, only about 8 of them can be considered real, major battles rather than skirmishes. So I think we definitely need to reassess how we look at the Wars of the Roses. I still think it's absolutely fascinating. And yes, it is still a war, but I think it's definitely right that we call it the Wars of the Roses, because, as I said, to recap, the First Battle of St Albans has a very different goal in mind than the Battle of Towton, when Edward IV wants to crown himself king. The Battle of St Albans had a very different motive. And then again, the Battle of Barnet is fighting against people who helped Edward become king at the Battle of Towton. And then the Battle of Bosworth is much less Yorkist versus Lancastrian. Lots of Yorkists fought for Henry VII because they disagreed with Richard III. So I hope you found this video somewhat interesting. I hope it's not been too rambly and not gone on for too long. But these are some points I wanted to make about the Wars of the Roses. Now let me know if you have found this interesting, because I have been making a few Henry VII videos and people in the comments have been asking me some things about the Wars of the Roses, and I will make some more stuff about the Wars of the Roses because I think it's interesting. But let me know if you'd like to see that, because I don't want to go ahead and make things and be all enthusiastic about it and then nobody wants to watch it, or people would rather I do something else. I don't mind, just tell me what you honestly think, tell me what you would like to see, and yeah, hit the like button if you did enjoy it, tell me what you'd like to see in the comments, as I've said about 5 times now, and share it with your friends if you enjoyed it that much. So thanks very much for watching. This has been History with Hilbert with some more Wars of the Roses. Good old 15th century warfare. Love it. Alright guys, see you soon.